Hey everyone. Today's video is an excerpt from one of my college classes, and in it I go through about the last century of music and discuss how the medium that is delivering the music to the audience has an effect on the kind of music produced. I thought it was an interesting topic to show how technology changes, technology being how music is delivered from acetates, recording music to 78s, 45s, 33 RPM records, tapes, and also how the time and the different kinds of radio formats have changed. And now we're into streaming and what that all means. And anyway, this is just something I put out there. I don't consider myself an authority on this, but I do think it's kind of an interesting topic, and I hope you enjoy it. So if this video actually makes it past the YouTube censors, there's copywritten material that I used to sort of augment the discussion. So that means that this has been demonetized. So if you could subscribe, like, share, comment, that would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, I've been Pete Calandra. Thanks for watching, and let's get right into it. All of the innovations in recording technology were in the pursuit of popular music. You know, Louis Armstrong was popular music of the time. Les Paul was popular music, and he invented overdubbing and multi-track. Then you can get into all these songs that you started using technology to recreate echo and reverb, popular songs. You could talk about the Beach Boys and the Beatles and the studio techniques that they developed with their engineers, popular music, and you can go forward. A lot of song lengths are dictated by several factors, two of them being the era and the medium being used, right? So let me open up this PDF. Okay, so medium creates limitations. So back in the day, the first really commercially available things were 78 RPMs, like albums, records, right? They were 10 inches, maybe sometimes 12 inches, and they went around a turntable 78 times per second. And that would let you get about 5 minutes worth of music. Then there were 45s, right? The 7-inch 45-minute record can fit approximately 5 minutes per side for a total of 10 minutes. And then a long player, 33 RPM albums, the 12-inch albums, can hold up to 20 minutes per side, about a little longer sometimes. And I'll talk about that a little later on. I want to talk about lengths of songs. So I went through the Billboard Top 100, the number one songs of the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s by year. There's a reason why this is important. I'll get to that at the end. So I have a game plan if it seems a little esoteric. So Tommy Dorsey, your grandparents, my parents loved Tommy Dorsey and his brother Jimmy Dorsey, and their song "I'll Never Smile Again" was 12 weeks at number one, and it was 3 minutes 11 seconds long. So we'll just taste these songs. We're not going to listen to the entire songs. So that's 1940, 3 minutes and 11 seconds. And we're still like in the swing era, even though that's a crooning ballad, right? We're in the swing era, the big bands. Count Basie was popular. Jimmy Lunsford was popular. Duke Ellington was popular. But these are the number one songs, right? So Jimmy Dorsey recorded a song in 1941, Amapola, 10 weeks at number one, and it lasted 3 minutes and 23 seconds. So let's listen to that, a little bit of that.
A boy found a dream upon a distant shore. A maid with a way of whispering, "Si, senor." Each night, while guitars would softly play, the tune seemed to dance round the words that he'd say. Amapola, my pretty little puppy.
Okay, it's interesting, right? They call this a foxtrot, that beginning rhythm. Does anybody know what that is? Boom, 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 boom. Astor Piazzolla? It's a tango rhythm, and then in the chorus it goes into a foxtrot. Okay, Glenn Miller, 1942, Midnight Cocktail, 10 weeks at 3:16. So 3 minutes and 16 minutes long, right? So just think about it. 12 weeks, 10 weeks, 10 weeks. Let's listen to just a little bit of this. Just a little like history fact. Glenn Miller had a big hit song called Pennsylvania 6 5000. That was the phone number of the Hotel Pennsylvania, which is where they performed. The Hotel Pennsylvania, which I believe has been torn down, is on 7th Avenue, right across the street from Madison Square Garden. Let's go up to 1950, and you're going to hear a big change in the music stylings, right? You're going to see a smaller ensemble. Again, 10 weeks, Goodnight Irene by Gordon Jenkins and the Weavers. And the Weavers were important. They were a folk group, and they were important because they spawned Pete Seeger, who's one of the great songwriters and activists of the second half of the 20th century. So 3 minutes and 9 seconds. So this is Pete Seeger here.
Irene, good night.
Sorry, Pete's playing the banjo.
Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams.
We learned this song, Irene, from a friend of ours. His name was Hughie Ledbetter. He called himself Leadbelly, king of the 12-string guitar. Some people thought he was the greatest folk singer that ever lived in America. We knew him best as a rememberer of folk songs, and he taught us dozens of them, especially Irene. This was his theme song, and he sang.
All right, you get that, right? I wanted to show Pete Seeger. That's why I didn't play the single, but the single's about 3 minutes long. But you see a dramatic change in the instrumentation and the style of music, right? No brass instruments, no strings, orchestral strings, no violins, violas, and stuff. No woodwinds, right? Small ensemble, no drums, no bass. Still about 3 minutes long. Let's listen to 11 Weeks, Johnny Ray, Cry, right? Let's listen to this a little bit. I can't listen to that. So again, a small instrumentation, light drums, bass, guitars. There's a celeste in there, acoustic guitars, or maybe very clean electric guitars. The music language is changing. Now, let's move to 1956. Now, the one problem with this is that these are the number one songs, right? Because of America's social situation, there are no African-American songs. I could go, but what I will tell you is that I could go through the history of African-American pop songs, and they would imitate the same length of song and stuff, and how long songs were number one and stuff like that. So 1956, Elvis, Don't Be Cruel. Big difference here. 2 minutes and 2 seconds long. So you've chopped off over a minute. You've chopped off a minute and a half from some of the early, like 3 minutes and 23 seconds, a minute and 20 seconds, right? Let's listen to Elvis with the Jordanaires singing background vocal. Okay, so what's different about the beat? Can anybody explain what's different about the beat on this song than anything we've heard so far? A shuffle?
Past, the future looks bright ahead, but don't be cruel.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. There's a little bit. Yeah, there's a little bit of a in the hi-hat, right? But it's not really, the hi-hat's not turned up loud, right? But yes, a little bit more of a shuffle. But you're hearing very strong 2 and 4 on the backbeat, right? You're hearing the backbeat.
To who heart is true, I don't want no other love.
Like the very first rock and roll song, allegedly, was something called Rocket 88 by Jackie Brenston and the Delta Cats. This was actually, I don't know if you know who Tina Turner it was, but it was Ike and Tina Turner in the 60s were huge, early 70s, huge. They had, breakthrough hits on with Proud Mary and other River Deep, Mountain High. They had lots of hit songs. This was his before he met her. I think this was his group. And a little side note is that I believe this is also the first use of distorted guitar. And I told the story last semester. And what happened was they were driving from Memphis down somewhere in Alabama to record this, and the guitar amp fell out of the trunk of the car. I guess they didn't close it. It damaged the guitar amp, and when they got to the studio, the guitar started playing. The sound was all distorted, so maybe like it punched a hole in the speaker. The guitar player was upset about this, but then when they heard it in the context of the band, they're like, no, let's just keep it. Let's listen to a little bit of this, and you'll see that this is earlier. This is like 51.
Women have heard of jalopies, you've heard the noise they make, but let me introduce my new Rocket 88. Yes, it's straight, just one way. Everybody likes my Rocket 88. Baby, we'll ride in style, moving all along.
What's different about this also is you definitely hear the shuffle on the hi-hat, and you're not hearing the backbeat yet. The bass is being doubled by the guitar, and it's playing 8 notes to the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's different. Before that, there was a period of time where there were 2 notes to the bar in the bass, then 4 notes with swing, and now with this kind of music, you got 8 notes to the bar, so the 8th note becomes the dominant bass rhythm. 58. This is 5 weeks later, the Champs, Tequila. Instrumental song. In the 40s, there were instrumental songs that were hits. Then vocal songs started, through the 40s had the longest number one thing. But here we've got an instrumental song, number one, for 5 weeks. So notice that's the least amount of time. The amount of time a song is number one goes down dramatically. More and more stuff is being released. 58, we're in the baby boomer era. 1958 is sort of the end-ish of when baby boomers were born, 1960-ish. So if a baby boomer was born in 1948, 47, they're like 10, 11, 12, 13, 45, they're 13. They're teenagers. They're buying this product. There's more and more product being put out. Things are staying number one less time. So here we have another instrumental song from 1960, Theme from a Summer Place, Percy Faith, 9 weeks. And you'll notice that this is going to be completely different than the last 2 songs we heard. We heard Rockin' Elvis, we heard Rockin' Tequila, and now we're hearing this, which is like, Schmaltz City. Easy listening, it's like Muzak. That also brings me to the point that the 1960s had an extremely wide variety of different kinds of songs were hits. There were a lot of instrumental songs that were hits, like that were played a lot on the radio. This song, Booker T and the MGs, there was a tune by Vince Guaraldi, that jazz trio song. There was Ramsey Lewis, the In Crowd, right? There were instrumental songs that were top 10 hits in the 60s. You have that now? No, I don't think so. So 1964, the Beatles start on the scene, right? And I Want to Hold Your Hand, 7 weeks, 225 again. And when you look at the 1964, 65 charts, it's like the Beatles had so many number one hits. It was ridiculous. It was like you didn't live through it. I did. It was just insane. Everybody listened to AM radio back then. WABC. It used to be actually the highest rated music station in New York. Cousin Brucey was one of the DJs there, and he and a few other DJs helped to popularize the Beatles in America. And they used to say, hey, it's WABC. I definitely remember hearing that. So then 1966, 2 minutes and 45 seconds. It's the Monkees with I'm a Believer.
I thought love was only true in fairy tales, and for someone else, but not for me. Our love was out to get me. That's the way it seemed.
The Wrecking Crew is the rhythm section on this. The Monkees didn't play their instruments until later on. Then 1967. So notice, we're starting to go up in time, right? A little bit. 1967, Lulu, an English singer with To Sir with Love, 5 weeks, 2 minutes and 45 seconds. That was a theme song from a incredible Sidney Poitier movie of the same name. And the song is To Sir with Love. And 5 weeks again. And the other thing that's important about this song for pop music is Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin is playing, before Led Zeppelin, is playing the guitar on here. And John Paul Jones, who was Led Zeppelin's bass player, he had his birth name, and then he had a stage name of John Paul Jones. He plays the bass on this, and he wrote the string arrangements. These guys were big session musicians in London in the mid-1960s. John Paul Jones was a great bass player, and he was also a first call arranger. Like, he could write out music on score paper. He was just such an incredible musician. With this, the music's starting to get a little bit more sophisticated with the string writing, and the chord progression for the song's a little bit unusual, and her vocal take is great. And so we can listen to this a little bit.
Those schoolgirl days of telling tales and biting nails are gone, but in my mind I know they will still live on and on. But how do you thank someone who has...
If you want to study a great pop arranging techniques, listen to this song and break it down, like what's going on every measure, like, you know, what instruments are playing, how they build up the arrangement. It's beautiful. It's really great. And her vocal take on this is great. Up until this point, the main vehicle for transmitting music was one of two things. It was AM radio. AM radio, your parents might have like a big console that has a turntable in it, a speaker, one speaker, and a tuner with the power amp and the AM radio. Or most people had little portable transistor radios, which I had, and I used to sleep with it under my pillow every night to listen to music to go to bed to. But the main way that people listened to music was AM radio in their cars as they were driving around. So there wasn't Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, 500 streaming services. There was none of that. And there weren't tons of radio stations. What happened was that all of these stations had formats, and you had to fit your music into the format, otherwise it wouldn't get played. Part of that format was the time, the length of the song. You weren't going to get a song more than 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes at the most, but the closer to 2 minutes you get, played. Shorter songs meant that there was more time to play commercials between the songs. So in other words, if you had an hour, in an hour you could play 32-minute songs, or you could play a wide variety of songs by all the favorite artists, capture your audience, and let's say you played 15 songs in an hour, you'd still have 30 minutes for commercials. But you were playing a lot of songs by popular artists, and that would attract listeners. It's generated by advertising revenue, affected the format of the music, and also that in combination with how much you could get on singles. So what changed was the advent of FM radio in the late 60s. And with FM radio, you started getting DJs who became tastemakers. And in New York, the big radio station was 102.7 WNEW. And you had a handful of DJs there, Pete Fornatel, Vin Scelza, Allison Steele. And these people had incredibly eclectic tastes. you would have a set of music for 30 minutes with no commercials. And that set of music might be a song by the Beatles, a Love Supreme by John Coltrane. It might be a Joni Mitchell song, followed by Bitches Brew by Miles Davis. That would be a set of music. That combined with the popularity of and the accessibility of turntables that could play long players, LPs. When I was a child, my older sister, she's 10 years older than me, she had hundreds of singles. She had singles of almost all these songs and a lot of Beach Boys and Beatles, early Beatles. Then my brother, who's 5 years older than me, he had some singles, but he started buying albums. I only bought albums by the time it came, I got to be a teenager and started having money to buy stuff. Albums could have about 20 minutes of music on each side, so 40 minutes. What started happening was that the musicians, instead of thinking like single to single to single with no connection between the music they write, they started thinking of the album as a through piece where they would definitely try to have songs that would be popular hits, but the album became a story. And that is where you get something like Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. You get Sgt. Pepper's by the Beatles. You get Side 2 of Abbey Road. You get What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. Concept albums. Art music. Music started becoming artful. But you still had the problem of airplay, short songs. Well, in 1968, that got destroyed by guess who? The Beatles. Hey Jude, 9 weeks, number 1. 7 minutes, 5 seconds, 2.5 times longer. Let's move forward. 1969, The Fifth Dimension. Aquarius, Let the Sun Shine In. 6 weeks at number 1. 4 minutes, 50 seconds. Again, complex, right? The song goes, and then at the end, they recorded the song, and then they recorded the second part of the song, and then they just spliced the tape together. 1970, Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water, 6 weeks, almost 5 minutes long. Another song, if you want to study string arranging, would be great. So then we get to 1972, and we have the granddaddy of them all, Don McLean, American Pie, number 1 for 4 weeks, 8 minutes, 34 seconds. Great piano part by Paul Griffiths, New York City session player. There's an isolated version of the piano part that you can find on YouTube, and I've recorded it. It's if you want to learn how to play gospel rock piano, it's the thing to listen to. It's unbelievably great.
A long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile. And I knew if I had my chance that I could make those people dance, and maybe they'd be happy for a while. But February made me shiver with every paper I deliver. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step. I can't remember if
people my age can sing every word to this song when it's playing. All 8 minutes of it. But it just goes on.
Crown, the courtroom was adjourned. No verdict was returned. And while Lenin read a book on Marx,
the courts kept practice in the dark, and we did dirges in the dark, whatever it is, So, okay. So now let's move on to how an album was constructed, right? Now, the reason why you could only fit about 20 minutes worth of music onto a side of an album is it's only a certain size. On a long playing disc, stuff at the beginning of the recording of the disc on the outside part has better audio fidelity, and as you get closer and closer to the center of the disc, the fidelity drops down. If you're going to have like a 25 or 30 minute album side, the audio quality would suffer. So they found that about 20 minutes is a good thing. And a lot of recordings were actually 35 minutes, 17 minutes on each side. But that gets pushed, and we'll see that. So let's take a look at album Rubber Soul. So this is the first of the 4 great Beatles, the 4 or 5 great Beatles albums, Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, White Album has great moments, Abbey Road, and, you could think Let It Be also has some great moments. But those four albums, Rubber Soul, Revolver, Peppers, and Abbey Road, those are the four of the greatest albums ever made. Okay, so let's take a look at this, right? So 225, 205, 318, 240, 216, 241, 240. So you've got 7 songs, 18 minutes in 7 songs, right? Now, what is the other thing that's really interesting about this? So you've got 7 songs on a side, and you've got Norwegian Wood was a single, You Won't See Me was a single, Nowhere Man was a single, Michelle was a single, The Word was a single. You got like 5 singles that were released on here. It's like it's money, Side 2, What Goes On, like 247, right? Another 7 songs. I'm Looking Through You, In My Life, Wait, Run for Your Life. Hit songs. So on this album of 14 songs, right, you had like 10 hit songs. Interesting. And the album is 18 and 16. I believe that's 34 minutes long. Act 17, so 35 minutes long. Let's move up to 1971. Allman Brothers Band live at Fillmore East. Statesboro Blues, 4 minutes. Done Somebody Wrong, 4 minutes. Stormy Monday, 8 minutes. Side 2, You Don't Love Me, 19 minutes and 6 seconds long. FM radio played the entire side. I heard it when I was a teenager, right? Side 2, 2 songs, Hotlanta, 5:10, and In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, 12 minutes and 46 seconds. Now look at this, Whipping Post, 22 minutes and 40 seconds, played on FM radio. Let's move to England, 1972, Yes, Close to the Edge, one of the great progressive rock albums of all time. But first of all, this is one of the great live albums of all time and the greatest blues rock live album ever made. This is just, if you've never heard this album in its entirety, you're missing something. Let's make this bigger. We scrolled in, sorry. Okay. Side 1 is 1 song with 4 movements, 18 minutes and 43 seconds long. Side 2, 2 songs, right? And notice you're getting movements, sections, concept albums, art. 1972, Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. You're starting to push the length here at 43, almost 44 minutes. 1 song, 22 minutes and 40 seconds long. 1 song, 21 minutes and 6 seconds long. It's like an opera, right? Lots of sections. And when Jethro Tull played this live, they did like a 8-minute version of it. The Who's Tommy used to play that too live, as sort of a truncated version of that when that came out. 1977, Steely Dan, Asia. Black Cow, 5:10. Asia, 8 minutes long. Deacon Blues, 7:37. This is the song that was the hit, almost 4 minutes long. 5:54. So one song is a little bit below 4 minutes. That's possible, Raf. I will tell you that it had an increase in the oddness of sounds found on recordings was the use of recreational drugs. I'll tell you that. Asia used to get played 8 minutes long on the radio. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because part of creating music that you want to be heard is understanding the time period you're living in, creating something that's unique, that's you, but also something that can fit into something that has like an expectation. I don't want to say that you pigeonhole into a formula or anything like that. We live in a time now where ever since the advent of MTV, people of your age, your attention spans have been dramatically affected in the negative by media, right? You are constantly exposed to media that's sound bites, short things. So, for example, when I was growing up in the 1960s, right, how does this affect you? I started releasing a year and a half ago. Was it a year ago? No, it was almost 2 years ago now. I started releasing this jazz funk music. For me, the music needed to be between 4.5, 5, 6 minutes long to say what I wanted to have said. I was told by a radio promoter that my songs can be no longer than 4.5 minutes long. So I wrote a song that was 4 minutes long, and it got a lot of airplay. It got a lot of radio play and on whatever small stations still play that kind of music. I also have this ambient music I release as well, piano-based music, orchestral music. And I submitted a piece that I released earlier this month, and it did very well on playlists. It's gotten in like 2 weeks, so just solo piano music. In 2 weeks, it's gotten almost 11,000 plays, and it's been put on a lot of playlists that total about 240,000 subscribers or listeners or whatever they're called. But I got feedback from one person who said, look, on my playlist, I only have songs that are 2.5 minutes long. It's too long. My piece is 4.5 minutes long. If you're going to go out into the world and you want to be heard, you have to learn how to tell your story in a particular format so that it can get played. And that's like good and bad, because one of the things that happened with the long music is that a lot of untrained musicians started playing long songs really badly. So, for example, you saw that on the Allman Brothers album, In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, was like 8 minutes long. And they were great. Dwayne Allman and Dickie Betts, incredible on that recording. The drummers, the bass player, it's just like an incredible 8 minutes of performance. We went to the Beacon about 7 or 8 years ago to see the Tedeschi Trucks Band play it. And Derek Trucks, great guitar player. The same they played In Memory of Elizabeth Reed. He was in the Allman Brothers in the last iteration of the Allman Brothers. It went on for 35 minutes. His solo went on for 15 minutes. I'm sorry, you're a great musician. You're not 15 minutes soloing on 2 chords great. I'd seen them 3 or 4 times before that. It was great. They were playing songs that were, they were 7 minutes long, 8 minutes long, vocal songs with interesting breaks, good keyboard, brass solos, everything. But, an instrumental song that's like 35 minutes long, no, that's like basically 2 chords. No, I'm sorry. Those progressive rock things by Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer had long songs. Genesis had long songs. Jethro Tull, all these bands, they were good. They could really play these musicians, Marvin Gaye had long songs, had the best studio musicians playing his music, Being able to say what you need to say in a concise manner is very helpful. And this can even, this can even move itself into stuff where you're writing longer music. So, for example, the first feature-length film I scored was something called, was it the first one? Yeah, it was A 13th Child, Legend of the Jersey Devil. It was a B horror movie. It had a guy named Cliff Robertson who'd won an Oscar in 1968 for a film called Charlie, which was based on a book called Flowers for Algernon. And he also played John Kennedy in the Korean War. Yeah, I think in either World War II or the Korean War. And then he got blacklisted and he never really didn't work. But he was in this movie, and it was a low budget movie, and it sucked. And I wrote like an hour's worth of music, an hour and 15 minutes worth of music. And there was stuff in there where I wrote incredibly complex and busy music with lots of notes. And I learned over time to write music a cue that might be 7 or 8 minutes long with less notes and more effective. And the reason why it was effective was that it could be played and people could talk over it, so they could turn the volume of the music up because you weren't conflicting with the story. You were part of the story, and you weren't the story. So learning economy and how to fit into certain restrictions can really be helpful. But we do live in a time where clickbait, you look at YouTube videos and people have these really, like they're doing all these crazy poses and trying to get, like the people to pay attention to them. And then you watch the video and it's really boring. So, okay. So that's that. Hopefully that was interesting for you. And hopefully you'll think about that as you're creating your final piece, and hopefully you'll take that on with you. And remember that all of these things that I talked about became possible because of the technology of the time. When Glenn Miller and Tommy Dorsey, they were all recording onto 78s, and they were all recording with a couple of microphones in the room. It was mono, and then the studio changed things. The studio, as I've talked about, became part of the compositional process, which is what we're doing here. We're taking that to the nth degree by having everything contained into the computer. So, okay,